Good morning, everyone. Good evening. Sorry, that's a nice start. And the reason why I'm all confused is that I'm now based in Morocco, and our guest for tonight is based in Thailand. And I know um, most of our audience is based in Hong Kong and Singapore. A few from the Middle East. So this Facebook Live series starts to become a very international one, which I'm very happy with. So I'll say a few words of introduction before we dive into the topic for tonight. So I am Camille, Uplifter's head of programs. And I also want to remind everyone what Uplifters is and does. So we're a nonprofit organization based in Hong Kong. And what we do is that we empower underprivileged communities with online education and peer support. So what we do concretely is we offer an online course on money management, personal growth, and mental well-being for domestic workers. If you want to be joining, if you are a domestic worker, a migrant domestic worker, and want to be joining, it's very easy. You just need to go to our page and click send message to enroll in the course. So you have the banner with all the information that you need. And tonight is the 26th episode of our Uplift Your Night series. And so we're very delighted to already have 14 persons connected, which is a very good start. So what is the objective with this series? The first one and the most important one actually is to be together. Uplifters is first and foremost a community. And of course, as a community, what we want to be doing with this series is also to keep learning together, learning from each other, supporting each other. And the topic for tonight is a very important one. So now that we're in January and everyone is talking about New Year resolution, we thought, well, what about if this year loan repayment was the one right resolution to improve your life? So that's a big one. And we know from experience, personal experience, but also because some research was made that more than half of all resolution usually fail. So how can we make sure that this year, this resolution, if you decide that it will be your resolution to start paying back your loan effectively and efficiently, how do we make sure this will be successful? And to help us navigate this very important topic, we're very happy to have Rosalia Guito as our guest tonight. So I'll introduce Rosalia very soon. You still need to be a little bit patient. She's the CEO of an organization called Bixie, which is a great organization. She'll be sharing tips and tricks so loan repayment does not have to be that, very unreachable goal anymore. So as to Bixie, Bixie is a financial home for women that encourages savings and wealth generations through knowledge, tools, and network. And I'll let Rosalia say a little bit more about it if she wants. I'll just screen the website here so everyone can go and have a look for those who do not know the organization yet. So I'm very happy to see we're almost 20 now, and I'll have a very quick look at who's with us. Hi, Odie, very nice having you there. Mary Grace, Rachel, Ellen May, Rilin, Jeneline, Marianemi, wow. So it looks like the topic was like very waited for. I'm very happy with that. So without waiting more, I'll introduce Rosalia. And here you are, Rosalia. Good evening
Hi,
to you.
Hi, Camille. Thank you for
So
having me.
with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so excited to talk about my favorite topic, which is getting out from under debt.
Thank you, Rosalia. Do you want to say a few words about who you are and what Bixie is and does, like very briefly, before we dive into asking you all the questions we have about how to pay off debts?
Absolutely. So Bixie is a financial technology company. And as Camille mentioned, we're really about focusing on walking women through, accompanying you on your journey towards financial freedom. We do this by encouraging savings and generation of money, so wealth generation, through three key ways, and that's knowledge, network, and tools. We provide financial literacy, automated financial literacy on our application. We provide a community of like-minded women who are also interested in connecting and supporting each other as through their financial journey, including with events like tonight, where we share tips and tricks on how we got ourselves from out from under debt. And then we provide the tools. So the tools necessary. Once you feel confident in your knowledge and you feel supported by a network, these are the tools that you can avail yourself of when you're ready to make those key decisions when it comes to investing and saving. So, we have put all of this on an application. It's available on iOS and Google Play, and we'll put a link in the Facebook and the YouTube link below so that you can download the app, which has gone live in the Philippines.
Thank you, Rosalia. I'm just like screening some of the comments we have so you can also have all the information you want about Bixie. And I think we'll be slowly starting with the first question I had for you, Rosalia, talking a little bit about your own background, like yourself. So I know your mother was an overseas Filipino worker, and you also yourself, you experience how it feels to have debt. So I was thinking maybe we should share a bit. You could share a bit about your background and your own experience when it comes to that, because it's always very interesting to be able to relate to other people who have been in a similar situation.
Yeah, so my mother was from the Philippines, from the north, to those of you who know, from a very small town in the north, in the province of Cagayan, outside of Tuguegarao. And she became a nurse and traveled to the US. My father also was a migrant worker. He moved from Kenya to the US, and that's how the two of them met. It was, there was some difficulties at the beginning. As I shared with Camille, my mother ended up getting rather sick. And she had to make some really important decisions when it came to, how she was going to ensure that my sisters and I would be able to access education when she was no longer with us. And it was actually a really critical financial decision that she made that made it such that I was, able to pursue not only some education, but a higher and then the highest possible education because of this important decision. And that important decision turned out to be life insurance, not to be moribund about things. But it's, and these are the type of things that, when you're a healthy 35-year-old woman, you're not thinking about purchasing life insurance. When you're a healthy 28-year-old woman, you're not thinking about these things. But it's really important that we think about these things because there are significant impacts on not only your own life, but the life of the forever life of your children. So it was actually, looking at those decisions and then looking also at my own decisions that made me want to come up with the idea for Bixie. So some of the decisions that I made, I was very lucky. I actually, just by my very nature, I didn't fall into consumer debt, so credit cards. I think it would have been really easy. I was living in the US. I went to undergraduate, so high school, college, and then subsequently law school in the US. I didn't fall under consumer debt. So that really very, very fortunate because that's also very, very challenging, higher interest rates, teaser. But I did fall under the spectrum of student loan debt. I didn't really have a choice. As I mentioned, my mother passed away. And I was fortunate enough to get accepted to a number of really, great education facilities, but I couldn't afford the tuition. As for anybody who knows about U.S. tuition rates, they're excessively high, and nothing is quite as high as going to law school in the U.S. So I found myself under quite a lot of student loan debt, despite the fact that when I did start my professional career, I was making a salary that was tantamount to a very comfortable living, but because I had so much debt, which many people can identify with, this wasn't matching up. And I think I did all of the things that everybody does when they have debt, regardless of how much it is. I kind of pretended it didn't exist for a long time. I kind of, then once I stopped ignoring the fact that, okay, this is catching up with me, then I just started to make like minimum payments on it. And of course, how money works, interest rates accrue and compound interest accrue. And then you kind of wake up in a few years and you're like, why don't I seem to be making a dent in this debt? And all of this to say, I wasn't being strategic about it because at the very outset, I really just didn't want to deal with it. And this is something that, you're absolutely not alone if you have similar reactions. Actually, the research supports that how women interact with money, especially when it comes to things like debt, we have emotions around it, and they tend to be those of anxiety. And these emotions of anxiety push us towards avoidance. And it's this avoidance that over time compounds and lends itself to really adverse, situations. So really, years after I started my career, I finally was effectively like forced to sit down. Okay, whatever it takes for you to sit down and face that ugly truth of whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's pouring yourself a tall glass of water, a really strong tea, or something stronger. Pick a day, set it on, picked a day, set it on the calendar, and it was like, okay, I'm going to actually look at all of this. I'm actually going to look at all of it, and I'm going to stare it in the face. And when I did, of course, those feelings of anxiety start rising because I'm like, how am I like, this is so much. This is so much more than I thought it was. Okay, so I let the feelings of anxiety kind of rise, keep rising, and then eventually fall, just sit with this discomfort. Again, I set a whole day, like nothing else, no other parameters. And then I started to tackle the issue. But I think the first part is, the short and the long of it is to stop living in denial that this exists, and to start looking at it in its face, because without that, you really can't start to come up with a plan.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Rosalia. I think it was very interesting. I'm looking at some comments. Women are very much relating to your story. I think you said a few very important things. Like the first one is that sometimes it's not that easy to think on the long term when you're young. So it's also part of it. Tonight we'll be discussing about, technical aspect and psychological aspects of being under debt, as you said. But sometimes it also starts with, thinking about how to plan for the future. So it's a tricky balance. Like, we do want to be planning, we do want to be preparing our future and the one of our family, but at the same time, the decision we make has to be reasonable enough so we don't put ourselves in a situation where we won't be able to help anyone in the end. So it all comes to how do we prepare for the future, for sure. And thanks a lot also for sharing about the psychological aspect of it. And I think we'll go a little bit deeper on this specific point. But before that, I wanted to share some of the comments we already have, because I'm very happy with some of our community members. So they're watching from everywhere. Like, we have people in the Philippines, in Hong Kong, in Taiwan. So that's very nice. And we have Jeneline saying how inspiring stories sis Rosalia, you migrant domestic workers can relate about that struggle and hardship. So yes, and again, like, we'll never say it enough, but Uplifters is a community, and I think somehow Bixie also is one, right? So it's very important that we can relate with each other's stories and that we can support each other. It's also part of the process of getting rid of debt. There is not only the technical aspects of it. We have Mary Grace. So Mary Grace is one of our team leaders at Uplifters. They're amazing women supporting new students. And she says that she already has the Bixie app that was shared by a mentor, so a very experienced team leader, but she didn't start using it. So I think Mary Grace might be even more curious about it. Very nice. Jelining saying again, very useful, helpful information for us domestic worker. Awareness is a big part of it. Nelly, very inspiring experience. Thank you very much, Rosalia, for sharing. And we have more people joining us and saying thank you and good evening. We're now 50 people connected. And so, yes, when I was saying like, let's go a little bit deeper about, how do we deal with the financial stress that is associated today? So you've been explaining something very interesting. Some research were made on how this anxiety feeling can lead to avoidance and how avoidance just make it worse. But to start with, like, how can we release this financial stress? Is there anything you would like to share with us?
Absolutely. Super important. Meditation. I think it's been a complete game changer in not only how I was finally able to tackle my debt, but in so many other areas where that similar feeling of just like anxiety, wanting to do avoidance and wanting to turn away. We actually at Bixie, as Camille rightly mentioned, we also believe that community is a really critical part to getting women into a financial wellness and a financial freedom journey. So part of the series that we do is actually a series on wellness. So we have mindfulness coaches, we have a mindfulness and yoga session this Friday. It's really about, not to overly simplify, but a money mindset is so much more than just like thinking about being rich and going to work. It's really about tackling a lot of our anxieties around money, specifically around scarcity of money. And that to me is, a lot of that really starts with just trying to be okay with the emotional fluctuations and to realize that it doesn't have an impact on reality. Like how I feel about this arbitrary number sitting in a bank account somewhere saying that I owe them does not have a realistic impact on like where I'm sitting right now. And so I think that is a really critical tool to really start looking at your debt.
Thank you, Rosalia. Yeah, I think meditation is very important. And I think it's, as you said, at some point it comes to acceptance, like being under stress, like whatever source of stress we're talking about, it's accepting that we cannot always be happy, we cannot always be in control. But that, there is the way we feel, the way we think, and then there is the reality of the facts. And trying to kind of distinguish both is very important. I do have a question here, very, very interesting one, about how can you make right decisions while you're under financial distress? Is it something you'd be happy to answer to?
Yeah. So I remembered this one particular situation. I was studying, and when obviously I was studying, I was already accumulating student debt, and I wasn't earning a lot of money despite the fact that I had a lot of different side jobs, right? And I got a flat tire on my car, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you're living on a very, very tight income, that was tantamount to like a quarter of my rent at the time. And I remember being so distressed about this because, I was already working so hard and doing everything I can and like eking out a living. And then on top of it, I have to somehow find a way to, pay for the car that I need to go to the 10 jobs that I have. Right. And I think, how to make a right decision in that moment. I don't think there are many wrong decisions. I think the best decision you can make is to prioritize based on what's needed. Now, okay, maybe there are some wrong decisions. Wrong decisions would have been like, oh, what do I do? And like go to a bar and have a drink and spend the rest of my money there. Maybe not the best decision. But beyond just complete avoidance, I think the right decision is to not avoid. The right decision is to look at the problems in front of you and decide what's the most imminent. So my rent is due in 2 weeks. My job I have to get to in 1 day. The job pays for the rent. Okay, so I think that's like the order of operation, right? Like solve, figure out a way to solve the car issue, then figure out a way to solve the job, and then figure out the way to solve a rent. In some of these cases, it might actually, maybe a bridge loan, maybe an extension of credit is the right choice. But be very wary of extensions of credit, of course. Like, you want to make sure they A, come from legitimate sources, B, like the fine print is read, that there are, the interest rates aren't super variable or will, impact you adversely in the future. But I don't think there are many wrong decisions, as long as the key decision you're making is to tackle the problem in front of you.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a very good reminder, and like what the most important thing, and we often say that at Uplifters, is that you feel the decision is your own. It's really about owning your decision, as long as it feels right with you, and that it's not a complete nonsense, as you just give this example of going to a party and drink just to avoid. So my advice also to the community would be like, don't overthink it about whether it is a wrong or right decision. And try to find this balance in between listening to what your heart is telling you and making some sort of logical, decision. So I think it's very good advice.
Can I also just point out one thing? The absurdist example I gave was, I'm just going to leave and go to a bar. I think one that a lot of people actually secretly do is go online and buy something online. I think that's more modern and more relatable equivalent of, I'm going to go to a bar and have a drink. Why? We go why is somebody in debt and then they go online and buy something else because they're sated, because it's soothing, because it has an immediate impact. I think a lot of people have to be really cognizant, especially anybody listening right now, if that's a behavior that you have, that might not be the best decision to make in the instance when you're facing a lot of debt.
Thank you. I think it's a very important one, and I think it's always good not to make like this impulse some sort of taboo, and very important to also discuss them. Like with many of us have been there before, so and there is no shame about reacting this way. Again, it's very important to just speak out and see that you're not alone, and that we all have different reactions to how to deal with stress. And they're fine as long as we are aware. And I think it goes back to one of the comments I screened before. Awareness is very important. I do have a few comments that I'll be happy to read out loud. So we have Erza just saying we need to have an abundance mindset and just be grateful for everything we have in the moment and not focus on the lack. So that was in response to how do we deal with stress. And I think it's a very good one. And I'm happy that we'll be hopefully have enough time at the end of this episode to just share a bit about what we're grateful for. I think it's a very, very good practice. And we also have Anne-Marie saying, so she's saying hi, and she said she's heard about Bixie from Liz, who is the mentor I was alluding to just before. And she found it very helpful and very easy to use. And the most interesting part is the fact that you cannot actually have a group that you will hold accountable to whatever you create about your financial plan. And so I think, thank you, Maria. It's very, very, very relevant and very aligned to what Rosalia and I were saying about the importance of the community and also the importance of being surrounded with people who know what you're going through and who potentially have the same goal than the one that you have. That will help the motivation to sustain. That's for sure. Thank you for that. So now we'll slowly go into more technical aspects of it. So I'm not the expert here, but I thought it would be nice to maybe just go back to those two well-known methods when it comes to pay off debt. So for those who know Uplift as well, so we have this Dare to Dream online course where we help domestic workers to prepare for the future. And then we have a chapter about how to get rid of debt. And in one of the lessons that we have, and I'll just be quickly sharing my screen with you, we are talking about two different methods. So let me share my screen. Yeah. So the first one is what we call it the debt avalanche method. So this one is, let's say, the most financially logical approach. So it consists of paying off the highest cost debt before. So what does that mean? It means that you're looking at the ones, sorry, with the highest interest rate. So it's not really about like looking at the principal, looking at the amount of the loan that you took in the first place, but really looking at the interest. So that is for one option. The other, we call it the debt snowball method. And so this one is not that financially logical, not as financially logical as the other one. What the other one will help you do actually is to reduce the global amount, like the total amount of your debt, super fast, like faster. That is what the avalanche method will do. The snowball method, it will actually, it's more about what you were saying about like how overwhelmed you might feel when you have more than one debt. And so it describes how the first debt to be paid off is actually the smallest when you look at the principal instead of focusing on the interest rate. And the reason why this method also works very well in the end is that because you'll be quicker in paying off the smallest one, then it will be gratifying. You will feel your self confidence being actually boosted. And so the idea to experience quick wins will actually help you stay motivated on the long run and pay off the other debts afterwards. So these are two different methods. Obviously, they can be combined. So, if you feel that you need to be somehow reassured that you can actually do it, you could start with the snowball effect. And so you have a small debt being, paid off. And then after you can, feeling like more confident to tackle the highest cost ones. So I don't want to be, spending myself at least too long on those technical aspects. But the one thing I wanted to say is that what these two methodology advise you to do in the very first place, and this is what you did, Rosalia, yourself, as you were just mentioning it at the very beginning, is making a list of all your debt. So you have this general picture, you have an overview of your situation, and that can be the psychological, overwhelming phase of the whole process, but that is a must. Whatever you decide to do afterwards, like however you decide to actually tackle the challenge, you need to start by listing things. So I'll just give the floor back to you, Rosalia, if you want to be saying a little more about how important it is to list those debt and why that is important.
Yeah, so regarding those two methods, happy to say I did both of them. So that's how much debt I had. So the first part is, so I don't know, for those who are not familiar with how student loans work, there is kind of your big student loans, and then there's all of these attendant smaller student loans. And so I started with Snowball. I was like, okay, let me just see if I can get some quick wins so I can start getting motivated. And okay, that was done. And then I did all the quick wins possible. And then what was left was the gigantic Mount Everest of debt. And then I was like, okay, like let's now go through that and looked individually line by line, which has the highest interest rate. And let me tell you, like, for those of you who have never read the fine print, you are obviously not alone, like I said, I went to law school. And while I was signing a handful of these student loan agreements, I too, because I knew I didn't really have a choice, I didn't bother looking at the fine print, right? Like that's something that we fall into. So then a decade later, when I'm looking at the fine print, I'm looking, oh my gosh, did I really just sign up for this interest rate? Hindsight is 2020, but don't feel bad. You're still very much going to be able to tackle it. So don't think that, oh, but I made this mistake and I didn't read this thing. Most people don't. That's actually one of the credit card companies and the debt companies and the student loan companies are actually counting on the vast majority of people not reading this. So you're not alone. And then, so once I started tackling the big mountain, that was the avalanche method. And, to Kemi's point earlier, when you're trying to figure out, the long and the short of it, how do I make, can I save it? Can I pay my, my day-to-day expenses and save money while also concurrently paying off the debt? I often am asked this question, what should I do first? And I hate to say it, but it's true. You have to kind of do a little bit of all of them first. So after looking at this, looking your debt in the face, then comes the second part, which is, okay, looking at what you're bringing in, directly, and then asking yourself, all right, how are these things going to match while I still have to pay myself, right? That kind of, that idea of really building a savings, paying yourself is really important. And paying my day-to-day expenses, right? And when those all three have to match for this to be a sustainable plan. And then, of course, it begs the question, if those three things don't match, what's the plan to get them to match? Is that things like negotiating your debt? Because there are strategies to do that. You can, depending on the type of debt that you've accrued, you can call the companies, you can come up with lower interest rate, you can consolidate. There are options to get that debt down. But conversely, is it about bringing in more income? There are obviously options of doing that too. I know a lot of people have full-time jobs, but we have, for example, among the Bixie community, a lot of women have side hustles or their own small businesses, and this brings up in another stream of income. So, the two sides have to balance, and as a result, you kind of need to have a really strong overview of the two sides, your debit and your income.
Thank you. I think it's very good advice. And yeah, I really liked what you say about your strategy, whatever it is in the end, has to be sustainable, right? Because paying off debt takes time. So you don't want to be neglecting another, areas of expenses that maybe you planned ahead for. So it's really like finding the balance. So you start the process of paying back while you continue having your life and you continue, spending where you decided to spend for. And maybe we always advise you to get rid of debt first, right? Before you start investing. But in some situation, it can be something that you can still consider to invest in a specific thing because you have an opportunity or because this is particularly safe while you're still paying back your loan. So it's a case by case situation. And if there would be one rule is really making sure that your strategy is sustainable and that you're not going to put yourself in a worse off situation in your day-to-day life because you started paying off your debt, because that's not going to work for sure.
And I want to kind of bring up this analogy of, I think of financial wellness, financial journeys is like tantamount to a wellness journey rather than yo-yo dieting. If you are constantly thinking about how many calories am I eating? How much money is my bank account? I've eaten too many calories today. You are going to be so, and I see this a lot with women or with people, or particularly when it comes to debt or dieting, overly being so scarce about everything then results usually in some kind of binge at the end of the week, right? So it's, I haven't spent any money all week and I haven't, I've been so good. And then I'm going to have this massive e-commerce binge on, a Friday night at 2:00 in the morning. This idea of sustainability, it has to be, you have to make sure that you can actually sustain whatever this balance is. And if you cannot, then you have to devise solutions or find support to help find that balance, because it can't just be, a pendulum swing, or else, as Camille rightly pointed out, this is a marathon, not a race. You're not going to pay your debt overnight. This is something that you have to live with like a lifestyle for a year, maybe 2 years. And part of that is the planning that you do. So it's going to be, several years that you have to live like that. And it has to be a life that you're comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Rosalia. I very like the analogy. And I think another analogy that we use in the course and that is very relevant, and, an advice that we keep giving to the community is that the most important thing is that you start, right? That you need to act now. And however small that is, the first step is the very important one. So I'll just share my screen again, like very shortly. Sorry. We often say it's like running, it's like getting into running practice. If you're trying to run a marathon, then you will start not being able to run even a couple of kilometers, but it's only after practice that you will feel great, right? You're not going to complete a marathon the first time you practice. So as you start to run further and faster, you begin to feel fantastic as you can clearly see your progress. So again, it's really psychological. It's really about putting yourself in a situation where you slowly feel that this financial stress is actually manageable, and then you will go from one battle to the other one. But you've never gonna come to this point if you don't start.
Yeah.
So it seems like a very obvious thing, and I'm sorry if it's like way too obvious, but honestly, because you have this feeling of being overwhelmed, even starting can sometimes feel very difficult. But the first step is very, very important.
And to keep going on this marathon analogy, when you mentioned earlier, what are some, wellness tricks that you use? There's meditation, but there's also marathon running. I've run my whole life. Running is great. Running is free. Running just requires, as long as you are able-bodied and a pair of shoes, you can run. I encourage everybody, like a holistic approach to money and life does entail some exercise. So I heavily encourage anybody who's never done it, sign up for a 5K marathon or 5K, just 5K. Do the training, do the practice. You will start to integrate these learnings into other aspects of your life.
Yeah, I love it. And this is something we advise in the course too. And like our community is very familiar with what we call morning rituals, where we
Yes.
have, walking out kind of routine that we want to have in the morning. And again, it doesn't matter how small or how short that is, as long as you put yourself in the situation where you will feel your body making progress just because of the consistency of doing things, and that's very rewarding and satisfying for sure. And I really like the holistic approach, and that's the reason why we dare to dream, and like all these money management education work that we do always goes together with mental well-being. They really go hand in hand, and I'm very happy we're sharing the approach. We have a very nice comment here from Labis Nasinat Khan saying, yes, that's the good thing to make yourself more satisfaction for thinking your payment. Actually, I do make that list, so I know how to pay step by step from the small to big amount. Thank you for more knowledge. Well done, Labis, and very good luck. Good luck for the process. That's a very, very good start. We wish you good luck. We have Erza. Even in the midst of paying off your debt, we need to have a money-making asset for us to give us second means of income. Being in debt is not easy, yeah. But first step is we have the awareness of our debt and then find solution. Yeah. I very much agree with that. Thank you for your comment, Urza. And I think also, one thing we didn't really mention, I mean, like you talk about other things that were like that made me think about it, but making a list of your debt is also the occasion to potentially identify illegal debts, things like things that should not be, that you should not have contracted to, right? So I know in Hong Kong and in Singapore, you have those loan sharks, and then you can find yourself having to pay back huge amount of money that you're not even legally responsible for. So I think it's very important when you list all your debts to look for red flags. Is this money lender licensed? Are these interest rates legal or illegal? Did they hold your ID documents, for instance? Because if you are in this situation, then one thing you can do is also seeking help. There are many organizations in Singapore and in Hong Kong and everywhere that can help you, that can give you legal counseling, legal advice. So these dates are, can be taken off your basket. So that's another reason why you really want to be listing off your debt and really having a close look at them. And I will just screen. I don't have the name of the organizations with me, but we can send that in the comments later. Or if someone from Singapore want to be sharing some tips about which organization can be reached out to in these situations, feel free. I know in Hong Kong, because sometimes also those illegal money lenders, they can harass you. They can come to your employer, and this is not necessarily something you want. But so you can file a complaint with the Hong Kong Police Money Lender Unit. So you have the phone number here. And for legal advice, you can go to Help for Domestic Workers or Mission for Migrant Workers. So those organizations are based in Hong Kong. But my point here is that is another interest, that is another advantage of making a list of your debt. And I hope no one is in this situation, that being said. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Rosalia. That was very, very interesting. I'm mindful of the time, so I think we're going to slowly come to an end. But if there is any last piece of advice that you want to be sharing with the community, be it technical or holistic, that is the time for you now to be sharing it.
Yeah, I do. I really want to. Well, first, I want to say congratulations to all of you who showed up today. This is that critical first step. It's the first week of January. You're really taking an important step towards making this year different than last year. Just to let you know, every beginning of every year, I sit down with my family. We come up with what are our financial, what are our goals for the year? Not just financial, but what do we want for our life? And this starts with a vision board plan, and then we get into the nitty-gritty of okay, let's open up our budget and expenses, and let's see to what extent our visions are achievable. I think that just you coming here, wake up the next morning and taking stock and doing something about it, that's fantastic. You're already further than I was for at least the first 10 years of me having my debt. The next thing I want to point out is, I really hope that you're able to work through the shame of debt. I think one of the things I'm most frustrated with about debt, even when I had debt, was that everybody pretends that they don't have debt. And the reality is we live in a consumer capitalist society that hands out credit cards to children like candy. Everybody has debt. People have mortgages. That's a debt. People have cars that they have not paid wholly. They're a lease. That's a debt. You're absolutely, and I want us to get away from this shame mindset, because that really holds everybody back. Nobody is concerned about saying what their net worth is, being on the cover of, magazines saying how much I'm worth, but nobody wants to say that for how much debt they're in, even though they're usually flip sides of the same coin. So I think, just know that you're not alone. Know that everybody around you has some kind of debt, and you are actually just somebody doing something about it. So I would also encourage you, and I know this is wrapped up in a little bit of the shame of it, get a buddy, get a debt accountability buddy. As one of the commenters mentioned earlier, it's great to find a group, to hold each other accountable. That was a really important part for me in my debt journey, being held accountable by my own family members, because my debt was impacting the rest of my family. So I think it's really important to find a debt buddy, be like, hey, are you on the same journey as me? Great. Let's set up our morning routine. We'll, make sure we're doing our meditations, our exercises. We'll check in once a month and see how our debt journey is going. It's really important that after looking at the problem, accepting that it exists, and coming up with a plan, that you have an accountability, built-in mechanism, because then you'll really start to see traction. And I'm not using this as a shameless plug, but I am going to plug Bixie in this regard, because we do have a platform for being able to set up your goals, and where you can kind of put in, this is my goal, this is when I want to reach it, this is how much it's going to take every week or every month, or and this is something that you can share with a buddy. So whether it's on our app or on a piece of paper, I really encourage you all to do that. And absolutely best of luck. I promise you can do it. I promise you it'll come to an end one day. And it will be the opposite of that feeling of anxiety. I cannot tell you, when I finally made my last student loan payment, I felt like 10 years had been lifted off of my back. It is an amazing feeling. And I will tell you, I will never get in debt again in my life. I'm not even one penny in debt. So it's a wonderful feeling. It's well worth it. And it's completely achievable. So best of luck. I hope that you are able to kickstart this journey this year. Thank you so much to Camille for this opportunity to speak with all of you, and Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you so much, Rosalia. I love how you help them project themselves, and visualization is also a very, very nice tool, right? Visualize yourself, being free from that. It will help you in the moments that are more complicated. Thank you, Rosalia. It was very inspiring, very informative. I loved it. We usually end the episode with sharing what we're grateful for, like the day that just passed or the week that just passed, because it's one of the best habits that you can create actually when it comes to mental well-being. Is there anything you want to share about what you were particularly grateful for today, or like the past few days, Rosalia?
So I actually do this with my husband every single night before bed. We say 5 things that we're grateful for. It's a wonderful practice. So I have so many things to be grateful for today. I'm really grateful to have spent, quality time with my newly born daughter. So that's, always a point of gratitude. Really grateful for the amazing dinner that my husband made tonight, so that I could be part of this live and, stay out late and, he's with the baby. So I'm really grateful for that wonderful meal. And I'm really grateful for the health of myself and my family during these very difficult times, because I know that's absolutely not to be taken for granted. And the list could go on, but I'll end there. Camille, what are you grateful for?
Well, thank you for sharing, Rosalia. I think I'm very grateful to have, to be surrounded with people who are helping me, having the life as well. Like my neighbor just offered me to take my daughter with her because she knew that I was very busy in the afternoon. And my daughter is doing homeschooling, given the COVID, past developments. So I'm very grateful to have her offering some help. I'm also very grateful. I mean, that was like a few weeks ago, but we had very nice holidays and I felt very rested. And when I came back to work, I mean, I know how meaningful my job is, but sometimes when you feel a little rested, energized again, then it becomes even clearer. So I'm very grateful for my job, actually, and very grateful to have the occasion to meet women like you, Rosalia, and all of you who are watching us. And I'll just end the whole session saying that I'm extremely proud of you, that you keep making me feel very humble every day. And as Rosalia said, I know you can do it. And we're very happy to help here with the community and the education, and we'll keep doing it for sure. So I think it's time to say bye-bye. Thank you everyone for watching. Keep sharing what you're grateful for. Like the comments flow will just keep going. Thank you again, Rosalia. Have a good night. And we'll see each other again, I'm sure. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.